Hi everybody, this is Aaron introducing part 2 to Revolution 1917. We left off in July, the midpoint of the year in the last video, and now we're going to talk about the second half of this incredible year that shaped a country and defined a century. This is Revolution 1917 part 2. So anyway, Trotsky and Lenin, who are working together to bring the Soviets into power, see that this July day's protest isn't going very well. People are only kind of half-hearted into it. It's not a real coup because they don't have the army on their side. So they really don't have any power. They're just striking again. And the army comes in and begins arresting people because the army is siding with the Provisional Government still to this point. So Lenin goes to Finland because he doesn't want to be arrested. Trotsky finds a hut by a lake and pretends to be a hay farmer for a few weeks before he's eventually found and arrested by the army. And the Provisional Government is really freaked out about this. You know, they want to get through this bourgeoisie capitalism and get on to socialism and on down the road, but they still do not end the war with Germany. So they're losing support of the people and, of course, more importantly, the army now, because the people who were supporting the Provisional Government are dying on the battlefield, and this is a real problem. So there's one general that really kept his reputation intact after the Kerensky offensive. His name is Kornilov. General Kornilov is asked by Alexander Kerensky to squash the rebellion, and he takes it to the next level. Instead of just squashing the rebellion, the last Russian general, or the top Russian general, attempts a military coup and tries to overthrow the Provisional Government. And a lot's going on here in a very short period of time. And Alexander, the Provisional Government's throwing their hands up in the air like everybody's trying to topple everybody here. So what he does, what the Provisional Government does, seeing the military coup happening in August and then into September, is they go to the Bolsheviks, the people who they were just crushing in July, and said, hey, we've got an armory with some guns, go meet the army and stop this military coup. And that happens in September. And the army finally decides not to shoot on Russian citizens like they did at the Winter Palace in 1905. And this is a pivotal point in the revolutions of 1917. The general is arrested, removed from power. The Provisional Government maintains power, but they agree to have elections in October. Trotsky is released from jail. Vladimir Lenin comes back from Finland and begins rallying his Soviets again, and they're very organized. They build Soviets and they build these labor unions in every major city. They said, we have an election coming up, we must win this election. This is going to be the beginning of the Soviet Union. And October comes, they have the elections, and to the absolute dismay of Alexander Kerensky, the Provisional Government is dissolved. Alexander is gone. He ends up coming to America, of all places, but that's another story. And Vladimir Lenin is brought into power with the Soviet Union in October of 1917, also known as Red October. But the story doesn't stop there. The campaign slogan, if you will, of Lenin, of the Soviet Union, was peace, bread, land. These are the three things we're going to bring to Russia if you elect us, and they had been elected. So they begin private talks, Lenin begins private talks with Germany and negotiates peace. Much to the dismay of their allies in France and Britain, they're like, we're not fighting Germany anymore. And so that puts more pressure on the French lines, and that brings more American troops into the war. And so that's how that all relates back to America. But now that there's no more fighting on the Russian-German line, the next promise is bread. Well, since there's no fighting going on, there's no supplies going to the Russian lines anymore, that's more food for the people, so they see an immediate bounty, an increase of food for the people. So they're like, well, 2 out of 3, we're really on a roll. The third part of Lenin's promise was land. So he begins to take land from the bourgeoisie landowners, business owners, and gives it to the people as promised. Well, this causes a real problem with the landowners immediately, and we go from revolution to civil war overnight. And the army is divided. A lot of the top army officers and certain corps are on the bourgeoisie side. Those are called the White Army. And the people, a lot of the lower ranking stuff, the other half of the army is called the Red Army. They support the Soviet Union, and they fight for 5 years. And I love military history. The reason why, let me describe how this works. The Russian Red Army owned the center of Russia, so it was very easy for them logistically to move around and counteract any offensive that the White Army tried to initiate, because they were the aggressors in this. The White Army was trying to retake the country back from the Red Army. Well, the White Army was on the outside of Russia, and so they could never really focus all of their troops in one direction at the same time because of the placement, because of their placement. Also, the people that supported the White Army were America, Britain, and France. And they were the people that wanted Russia back in the war, to go back to war with Germany, to take some of the pressure off the French lines. And so after 1922, the White Army is eventually crushed. The Soviet Union is now at peace and in power, but they have a long memory, and they never forget. The countries that stood against the Red Army from 1917 to 1922, the Soviet Union would last another 70 years, and they never let go of that hatred. What I want to take away from the revolutions of 1917 to apply to American politics today are 2 points. The first is in Das Kapital, where you have the conflict between the business owners, the corporations in today's terms, and the shareholders, and the laborers, the people that work at the deck plate level where I am. I go to work and I see how angry my coworkers are, and how a lot of them don't even look for work anymore if they don't have work, a lot of friends, or the people that do work are upset about how little they're getting paid when compared to how much the business owners and shareholders are being paid by simply owning the business that is already well established. Now, in the capitalist system, that's just the way it is. But the disparity, the gap between these two groups is growing. And as it grows, so does the anger of the majority, of the popularity down here. And if the people at the top of this food chain don't wake up, they're going to find themselves being sacked like Romans by the populace. Okay? That needs to be addressed. I believe there's a normalcy bias amongst business owners that do not understand just how angry the common people are here in the United States here in 2013. It's disturbing to watch. The second point is about revolution itself. We saw in 1917 there were revolution followed by protests, followed by a second revolution. A military coup was in there, and then we had civil war. So when revolution comes to a country, we won't say which one, but any country, it's not the revolution, the first revolution is not the one you want to pay attention to, it's the one after that. Because the people who caused the revolution are rarely good at running a country. Rarely. I mean, we just saw this in Egypt. The Muslim Brotherhood, throughout Mubarak, took over the country for about a year, failed at providing any basic services to the people, and they ended up with a military coup. That looks a lot like what happened in Russia in 1917, except Russia's military coup, failed. In Egypt, it was successful, and they're in power today. So when revolution happens, look for the instability of the government, look for the military coup attempt, and then look for the second revolution, because the second revolution is the one that's going to define the country. So that's what you need to take from this. I want you guys to leave a comment below, and I'll get another revolution video out as soon as I can. Thanks for watching.